The New York Giants and quarterback Daniel Jones have agreed on a 4-year extension. I'm going to tell you all about it. Plus, we're going to talk about Saquon Barkley and other cap issues coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina. Happy to have you with us again. And I'm taping this just literally an hour or so after the decision was made by the New York Giants to reach a deal with quarterback Daniel Jones. The Giants also franchise tagging Saquon Barkley, the running back. So I'm going to break down what we know, what this means for both of those transactions. And we're going to just go ahead and dive right in. Now, before I get into the details or what I have, the contract details, the full details are not out yet for Daniel Jones. We do have some numbers, so I will try and break all that stuff down for you and explain the ramifications and whatnot. So let us get right to work, shall we? Let's start off with Daniel Jones. The report is that his contract is for 4 years, $160 million, which comes out to $40 million APY. Now, before anybody flips out and says Daniel's not worth that kind of money, keep in mind that there are triggers that are likely included in this contract. Matter of fact, there are up to $35 million in incentives that if Daniel hits those incentives, he will probably max out at just under $200 million for the 4 years if he plays out the entire contract. So again, bottom line is it comes out to $40 million APY without all the triggers in there. And that leaves me to believe that there's probably, roster bonuses, maybe some not likely to be earned incentives and whatnot. So the Giants came up basically in their offer, giving Daniel Jones a little bit more than the $32.4 million they would have had to pay him on the franchise tag. Now, as far as guarantees, what we know so far, Albert Breer of SI.com reported that Daniel Jones has 2 years, $82 million guaranteed. So that says to me that Daniel Jones, that contract, both sides can get out of it after 2 years. So if you're the Giants, you can rip it up if the guy is doing well and just, reward him again. At that point, I believe Daniel will be about 28 years old, if I'm not mistaken. So if he continues to ascend, you tear that contract up, you give him a new one. Similarly, if he doesn't ascend, if he goes right back to being the Daniel Jones we saw in the first 3 years of his career, you move on from him. So a fair deal if that's how it's indeed structured, which is how it looks like it is structured. The total, by the way, that $82 million guaranteed money is $11 million more than what Daniel would have gotten had the Giants franchise tagged him this year and next year. So that total would have come to $71.3 million. And Daniel is getting $82 million guaranteed. So about $11 million more than what he would have gotten under normal circumstances. Okay, in terms of percentages against the cap, Jones is expected to count for an estimated 17% of the Giants' 2023 cap. Now, even though he's got an APY of $40 million, that doesn't mean his first year number is going to be $40 million. It's probably going to be a lot less. I don't know exactly what it is. Again, I don't have all the details of the contract, but I'll get my eyes on them and I will continue to break that down once I have them. But the bottom line is the Giants don't have to put out $32.4 million for Daniel Jones, which means that they can go ahead and they can do things now in free agency, including extending some of the guys that they might want to extend currently on the roster. But more on that a little later. Getting back to the percentage, Daniel Jones's estimated percentage of 17% is a little bit more than Kirk Cousins, who I believe is at about 16, just a hair under 16%. but less than what Dak Prescott is getting of Dallas, which is 21.9%. So overall, not a bad deal on the surface based on what we see here for Daniel Jones and the Giants. It does have the escape hatch, it sounds like, after 2 years. So, the Giants getting it done at the 11th hour. And, kudos to both sides for getting it done. Joe Shane had mentioned that he had met that Daniel Jones had been in the building. I'm sure the two sides had a conversation, a heart to heart about getting things done. But the bottom line is the Giants should be able now to get stuff done in free agency. If they had to put out the $32.4 million against their cap, they probably wouldn't have gotten a whole lot done, to be honest with you. So they will be getting some stuff done. Now, coming up, I'm going to talk about Saquon Barkley, who got the non-exclusive franchise tag. Don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, the NFL season might be over, but the NBA season is in full swing. And now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 if their first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to the spread and more. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And before I get into this next segment about Saquon Barkley, just a programming note. The entertainer and I are planning to go live this evening. I think it's going to be 7:30, but as soon as I nail down the time with him, I will post something and let you know. We both got to get our dinner breaks in, amongst other things. But I wanted to get this podcast out to you. We'll do a bonus show, a live stream that is in the works. And it'll just be the entertainer and I will be talking about everything that went down today. Probably won't be too long of a show, but we'll talk about it. Unfortunately, Bag Dog won't be able to join us. He has to work late tonight, but certainly, lots to talk about with the entertainer. So hope you will tune in. That will be on YouTube. So make sure you check the YouTube channel for the notice as to when we start, if it's going to be 7:30 or 8 o'clock. All right. In this segment, I want to talk about Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley was assigned the non-exclusive franchise tag. Now, again, the difference between the tag is the non-exclusive is one that it allows Barkley to negotiate with other teams. If he signs a offer sheet with another team, the Giants don't decide not to match it, the Giants receive 2 first-round picks as compensation. The non-exclusive franchise tag also pays out an average of the top 5 tag amounts at the player's position from the previous 5 years, whereas the exclusive would have cost them more. The exclusive tag would have paid out the average of the top 5 at the position as of this year, not the last 5 years. So that's the difference between the tags. And of course, the exclusive tag would have meant that Barkley couldn't entertain offers from other teams. So where are we at with him? The franchise tag represents 4.4% of the Giants' 2023 salary cap. Not horrible, but you'd like to get that number down a little bit more. The Giants have said that they will continue to negotiate with Saquon Barkley towards a long-term deal. They have until July 17th to do so. Now, once a long-term deal is struck, they will have to ensure that in the first year of the deal, Saquon gets that 10.04 million, which is what the franchise tag plays. That now becomes guaranteed. And like would have been the case with Daniel Jones and the franchise tag, that money comes out of the Giants cap space right away. So if Barkley signs for a long-term deal, the Giants have to give Barkley at least $10 million in cash, not necessarily cap hit, in cash. That could be taken care of very easily with a signing bonus and a very low base salary. The signing bonus, which would be prorated over the life of the contract. So you're talking, if they can reach an agreement, the two sides, you're talking potentially a really low number for Barkley in the first year, which would allow, again, the Giants to do some more stuff in free agency, extend a few guys if they want to, and just get ahead of some things, especially with guys like Andrew Thomas and Xavier McKinney and Azeez Ojulari having their deals being eligible for contract extensions, coming up. So again, the deadline is 7/17, July 17th, to get a long-term deal done. If they do not, Barkley will have to play out on the tag. Now, he does not want to play out on the tag. He kind of made that clear when he spoke to the reporters at the end of the season. But here's the thing, this is almost similar to what happened back in 2009. I don't know if you guys remember or not, but Brandon Jacobs, who was also a running back, ended up getting the franchise tag when the two sides couldn't come to an agreement by the tag deadline. So they used the franchise tag as a placeholder to keep other teams away. Because look, in the case of Barkley, I highly doubt any team's going to be willing to give up 2 first-round draft picks for him. So getting back to Jacobs, the Giants and he ultimately worked out a long-term deal, and everybody was happy. The Giants, now that they have Daniel Jones done, I would fully expect that they are going to work to get Saquon done as quickly as possible so that they can lower that amount, that first-year cap hit. Free agency starts next Monday. So that's when teams can begin talking to other free agents from other teams. And March 15th is the official start of the new league year. So the Giants have a little bit of time now on their side with Barkley. I don't know how close they are. I think there have been some reports that the talks stalled, that they weren't close. But, look, contract negotiations are always fluid. So I'm not concerned just yet about the Barkley situation. Right now, everything's kind of playing out the way I think the Giants had hoped it would, with getting Jones done and then being able to turn their attention to Barkley. So now what happens if Barkley doesn't get a long-term deal done and has, the tag going into April and May and June? Would he potentially hold out? That I don't know. But here's what I do suspect. Barkley has spoken in the past about how when he was injured and he couldn't be with his teammates, how it killed him inside, not to be able to be out there with his teammates, practicing, getting ready for the season, just enjoying that camaraderie. I would be kind of surprised if Barkley were to hold out. I don't think he would. Of course, he may choose to if he doesn't have a long-term deal, because that would give him leverage, obviously. But I would be surprised if it comes down to that. I just don't think that solves any problem. Yeah, there's an injury risk. I get that. But you know what? He's guaranteed slightly over $10 million on that franchise tag. So I think they'll get it done and all will be right in the world of the Giants. Now, how will this affect other signings the Giants want to do? Julian Love, I mentioned, he's another free agent. He's probably number 3 on the list if the Giants are looking to re-sign him. But I still get the feeling the Giants want to move on from Julian Love. I can't explain why. I think back really to last week at the Combine when Joe Shane mentioned that they were anticipating some veteran safeties to become available on the market. And it sounded to me almost as though they were looking to maybe get a little cheaper at that position, because they have, Dane Belton, they have Xavier McKinney. So, why go and go nuts with, re-signing Julian Love, which, granted, he's younger, he's still in his prime, but I think it's going to come down to costs. Just a gut feeling here. And maybe the Giants are looking at a safety in the draft for all we know. So that's where I see that going. So bottom line is, so far, I think the way things have unfolded, exactly how the Giants would have liked for them to unfold. And we'll just keep rolling along and seeing what happens with Barkley, because now that is the next big target, as well as, the Giants will probably look to get some money back from Leonard Williams. They'll probably extend him, because I don't see him playing on that $32 million price tag. It won't be a salary cut. It'll just be an extension. And I suspect they will look to maybe get Dexter Lawrence signed to the long term. But will that happen over the next, few days? I don't think it will, but certainly that's got to be on Joe Shane's to-do list, I would think. So, all right, coming up next, we have a listener question. So don't go anywhere. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast, the Danny Dollars edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. This quarterback Daniel Jones has agreed to terms on a 4-year, $160 million contract extension that could swell up to as high as $195 million with certain incentives. So everything kind of coming up Giants right now as far as, what they had hoped to do and what they have done. So we talked about Daniel Jones. We talked about Saquon Barkley. Now I want to answer a listener submitted question because, again, I want to get back to getting your questions in wherever I can on the podcast. Before I do, again, a reminder, tonight, I believe Entertainer and I are going to be going live. I'm trying to work out the time. I think, what did I say? I think I said to him about 7:30. I think that's the time we're going to look at, but it'll be posted on the YouTube channel once I fine tune the time with Chris. So hope you will tune in for that, and I look forward to answering your questions on the live stream. All right, now for this segment, we have a listener question from Joseph G, who writes, what we need and is not talked about is a good punt returner and kick returner. Can't keep using starters. We saw what happened to Adore. We also saw how a good one like Tony in the Super Bowl can change a game. Ours just keep running straight ahead into tackles. Your thoughts? All right, Joe, absolutely. The Giants can use an upgrade at kickoff returner and punt returner. Gary Brightwell is a kickoff returner. Did not like what I saw. Punt returner, they use Richie James, but, you're right. You don't want to use starters if you don't have to. But, you talk about the draft. You got to remember, Joe, very rarely do teams draft a guy who's exclusively a returner. Usually that guy is going to also, is going to be either a player on offense or a player on defense. So I firmly believe that, yes, the Giants are going to look to upgrade those two spots. They have to. As you said, the production wasn't there. And, injuries aside, which could happen to anybody, really, you can't really sit there, in my opinion, and say, oh, well, you can't do this because the guy's going to get injured. I mean, a guy could get injured on a regular offensive play or defensive play. But I do think they're going to upgrade the returner spot. It is important to flip the field, obviously. It's just a matter of who, but I don't think they're going to exclusively, go into the draft and say, oh, we have to get a guy who's a good kickoff or punt returner, regardless of the position, because it's not quite how that works. So yeah, Joe, you're absolutely right. But, will that come from the draft? Probably. Could it also come from free agency, veteran free agency? That remains to be seen. But certainly that is one of the needs. And it's one that's not being talked about a whole lot, given the other holes on the roster. So thank you for your question, Joe. Folks, that's going to do it for us here on this special edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. Thank you for tuning in. And again, those of you who catch us on YouTube, be sure to keep an eye out for the posting on the live stream. As soon as I have details, I will put that up and hope you will join us at that time. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. See you again soon, Giant fans.